My name is Jack Delaney. I'm 42 years old, a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Marine Corps, and I've spent over 2 decades serving my country across more battlefields than I care to count. I've led men through sandstorms, jungles, and frozen hills, and not once did I flinch under pressure. But that morning, as I opened my inbox and saw the subject line of that email, my hand hesitated. It wasn't the words that stopped me. It was the silence between them. The email was from General Harper. Subject: dinner invitation. Formal, respectful, carefully worded like a memo sent from someone who used to call me brother in arms. There was no friendly lead-in, no warm touch of familiarity, just the kind of message you send when you're keeping your distance. I'd been around long enough to recognize when something wasn't right. That morning, it felt like something had shifted, and the shift wasn't in the core. It was in him. We weren't always like this. Harper and I used to be close. We came up through the same blood and dust, watched each other's backs, built a bond you'd think was unbreakable. I still remember the mission in Kandahar, where we were pinned down for 36 hours. He said we'd either make it out together or not at all. That kind of thing stays with you, or at least, it's supposed to. But lately, he'd changed. The way he talked in meetings, the way he looked at me or didn't. I started noticing how plans were being made without me. How the newer guys with clean uniforms and fresh ideas were being invited to closed-door sessions. I told myself it was just the way things go. That maybe my time was winding down, but that email told me it wasn't just time passing. It was something deliberate. The dinner was set for Friday, 1,900 hours, at a place called Magnolia Room downtown. High-end, too fancy for a couple of jarheads who used to drink black coffee out of mess tin lids. I sat there staring at the screen, feeling like I'd already been dismissed and this was just the ceremony. The invite mentioned General Harper's son would be joining us. Andrew, the kid just got his commission a year ago, already being groomed for a command post. I hadn't even seen him in combat boots yet. The gut feeling stuck with me all day. I tried to shake it off, went for a run, hit the gym, pushed harder than usual. But the knot in my stomach tightened with each hour that passed. I've learned to trust my instincts. They've kept me alive this long. And right then, every instinct I had told me that this wasn't a dinner. It was a signal, a shift in power, maybe even the start of an exit plan I wasn't part of. I'd taken bullets for this country, buried brothers, watched men crumble under pressure. But I never expected to feel this kind of tension in an email. Never expected it to come from someone I once called friend. I knew I had to show up, shake hands, play the part. But deep down, I also knew something was coming. Something that wasn't going to feel like respect. Something that might just burn deeper than any wound I'd carried before. The valet took my keys like he was handling a stranger's car. I stepped into the Magnolia Room and instantly hated it. Everything gleamed, polished floors, quiet chandeliers, glass that didn't belong anywhere near people like me. I'd seen field hospitals with more warmth. A hostess in black led me to a private table in the back, tucked away like a confession no one wanted to hear out loud. Harper was already there. His suit crisp, face clean-shaven, eyes scanning the room like a man auditioning for a better version of himself. He stood to shake my hand, all smiles and practiced warmth, but it didn't reach his eyes. Next to him was his son, Andrew. That kid looked like he'd walked off the cover of a recruitment ad. Custom-tailored blazer, perfect posture, not a hint of sand or sweat anywhere on him. He smiled, that tight kind of smile you give when you've already sized someone up and found them unnecessary. Then he offered his hand like he was doing me a favor. The grip was firm but rehearsed. The kind of shake that says, I know who I am, and I'm not worried about who you used to be. I forced a polite nod, sat down, and let the fabric of the expensive chair swallow me whole. The waiter came and poured wine before I could say no. The room was too quiet. Even the silverware had a way of clinking softly like it had manners. Harper made small talk about policy shifts and training rotations, but it all sounded like filler. Andrew kept interjecting with questions, but not the kind that wanted answers. They were rhetorical, dismissive. How was it running things back in your day? Must have been a whole different world. I smiled through it, but I felt my jaw tighten. Every word out of that kid's mouth was a test. Not for him, for me. I'd seen insurgents with more subtlety. The food arrived, but I barely touched it. My appetite had checked out the minute I walked in. Sitting across from that smug face, I realized what this dinner really was. It wasn't a conversation, it was a slow erasure. And I wasn't about to let them bury me quietly. Harper set down his fork and folded his hands like he was about to give a sermon. He cleared his throat, glanced briefly at Andrew, then locked eyes with me. His voice dropped just enough to make it sound like this moment meant something. He started talking about the future of the Corps, about vision and adaptability. He used words like transition and modernization. He talked about how warfare had evolved, how we needed leaders who understood technology, social dynamics, and new modes of operation. Then came the phrase that hit hardest: fresh perspective. He let it hang there like it was supposed to mean progress. My chest tightened as he added youthful energy, saying it with the kind of careful reverence people reserve for things they think I no longer have. Andrew sat back in his chair, calm, smug, and silent. He didn't have to say a word. His presence was enough. This wasn't a discussion, it was a verdict. Harper tried to soften the blow by calling me instrumental, saying no one could deny my contributions, but each compliment felt like dirt being gently shoveled onto a casket. He used phrases like time to evolve and preparing the next generation. I heard the word retirement, though he never said it, just implied it with every carefully measured sentence. I nodded slowly, but inside I was boiling. They weren't firing me. They were phasing me out like a dated weapon system. I wasn't being asked. I was being told. And the worst part was the smile on Andrew's face. Like this was the natural order of things. Like it had already been decided and I was just here for the ceremony. I kept my voice even, made no scene. But my silence wasn't surrender. It was the storm gathering just below the surface. I walked through the gates Monday morning like I had for years. Same uniform, same stride, same coffee in hand. But something felt off. It wasn't loud or obvious, just a low-frequency shift humming beneath the surface. People nodded, but the warmth was gone. A few eyes flicked up and then away. Junior officers I had mentored suddenly seemed busy with their phones or looking down at clipboards that didn't need reading. My calendar, usually booked solid, was empty by noon. A meeting I'd been leading for months was now moved to a different time without notice. When I checked, I wasn't even on the attendee list. I stared at the screen for a long time. My name was gone, just like that. One shift in leadership, and it was like I'd never mattered at all. I passed by the planning room and saw the door shut with voices inside. Through the glass, I caught a glimpse of Andrew standing at the whiteboard, gesturing like he owned the place. A younger lieutenant walked by, noticed me, and suddenly remembered he had somewhere to be. The freeze-out wasn't open hostility. That would have been easier to call out. It was silence, omission, polite erasure, wrapped in chain of command. I stopped by the mess, trying to catch a few familiar faces. The conversations paused when I walked in, then slowly picked back up in low tones. One of the logistics officers looked up, then immediately turned back to his tray. I wasn't angry at them. Not really. They were just reacting to the shift like everyone else. Playing it safe. Keeping close to whoever held the power now. Back in my office, I stared at the walls. I'd hung my commendations there. Years of service, leadership awards, deployment plaques. They looked like relics now. I opened my inbox again, rereading the same automated updates. No personal notes. No assignments. Nothing that said I still had a role in this machine I helped build. The base hadn't changed physically, but it was no longer mine. I could feel it in the way doors stayed shut just a second longer. In the way conversations faded when I entered a room. They weren't asking me to leave. They were just slowly making it harder to stay. And that, somehow, was worse. I'd started clearing out my office that afternoon. Not officially, not yet, but the writing was on every wall I'd once decorated. Most of my things were already boxed up in my mind. I pulled open the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet, the one I hadn't touched in years. Behind a stack of old folders and outdated field manuals sat a leather briefcase, scuffed and dusty. My name was still engraved on the handle, faint but visible. I hadn't thought about that briefcase in over a decade. It was standard issue back when we first formed covert detachments. I popped the latches and opened it, expecting maybe old intel sheets or obsolete maps. Instead, there was one envelope inside, thick paper, labeled in black, Final Contingency Directive. My hands froze. That document had been written at the peak of my clearance authority. I unfolded it slowly. The wording was clear and sharp. In the event of a leadership breach or compromised command integrity, operational authority over Bravo Red would default to the last uncontested field commander. My name, it was still there, still active, not revoked, not amended. Bravo Red was real and dormant, a unit built for crisis, buried under layers of red tape, only activated under extreme need. I hadn't thought about them in years. The signature at the bottom was Harper's. Back when trust wasn't a question. Back when he believed in long bets. I sat back in my chair, the hum of the bass outside fading to nothing. They thought I was done, phased out, irrelevant, but this changed everything. This was more than a formality. It was a door they forgot to close. A new plan began forming in my head, slow and measured. No anger, no revenge, just clarity. The kind that comes when the fog finally clears and you realize the fight isn't over, not yet. They wanted fresh perspective. Fine. I had one. Backed by experience and something they hadn't accounted for. I wasn't out. I had a card left to play, and it was one hell of a card. The briefing was rushed, and the plan was sloppy. Andrew called it a calculated strike, a show of strength to reassure a foreign partner. But even before they rolled out, the air felt wrong. Intel was thin, terrain reports outdated. I saw the op order by accident, flagged it in a backchannel log that hadn't been disabled. My gut clenched. The coordinates pointed to a zone we'd redlined years ago for instability and ambush potential. 3 hours into the mission, the base went quiet. Comms went dark. No sitrep, no updates, just static. Then came the emergency beacon, scrambled and brief. Unit under fire. Multiple hostiles. No clear exit. Andrew was nowhere to be found. Rumor said he was in a strategy session. What that really meant was he was in over his head and waiting for someone else to solve the fallout. I didn't hesitate. I tapped into the Bravo Red secure line and issued activation. Coordinates locked. I met them at the airstrip. The sound of rotor blades washing away second thoughts. No medals. No permission. Just necessity. We moved like ghosts, tight and clean. By the time we hit the ridge above the valley, I could see flashes of gunfire. Our boys were pinned. Wrong side of the terrain, no cover, enemy flanking. I signaled the lead scout. Bravo Red split, fanned wide, and hit from above. Within 15 minutes, it shifted. We pulled every soldier out, 2 injured, none dead. I stayed behind until the last man was clear. The evac bird dusted off at dawn, and the silence that followed was the kind you earned. We made it back to base before the command staff even realized who had taken the field. The fallout came fast. Harper demanded a full report. So did the Pentagon. Andrew stood in front of the ops board, trying to explain how it all unraveled, but no one bought it. His voice cracked under pressure. The data made it clear. He misjudged the threat, ignored counsel, pushed the unit into a kill zone. And the only reason we weren't writing body letters was because someone stepped in without waiting for approval. Word got around, quietly. Officers started knocking on my door again, asking for insight, seeking clarity. Harper didn't say anything at first. He just looked at me across the command hall one afternoon and gave the smallest nod I'd ever seen from him. It wasn't respect, not yet, but it was something else. Doubt in the son he had tried to crown too early. And maybe, just maybe, a memory of who used to keep this place from burning down. The Pentagon Hall was colder than I remembered. Carpeted floors muffled every footstep, but the tension followed me in. I had the file under my arm, the one I'd been waiting to carry into this room for years. Not out of ambition but necessity. The Military Oversight Committee sat in rows, their faces unreadable, flanked by aides with too many notes and not enough experience. General Harper was already there, jaw clenched, eyes darting between committee members. Andrew sat beside him, stiff in his new uniform, trying to look like command hadn't already slipped through his fingers. I stepped to the front, placed the folder on the table, and waited. One of the senators asked me to speak. I kept it simple, presented the facts, risked personnel, misread intel, lack of preparation. Then I opened the file. Inside were documents showing direct chains of command broken, repeated dismissals of advisory input, and tactical failures under Andrew's leadership. The final page outlined Bravo Red's mission, its recent activation, and the result: full rescue, 0 fatalities. I let that hang in the air. Then I dropped the twist. Bravo Red's emergency funding, I said, comes through a contingency clause approved by the late Secretary Arnold. One of the committee members raised an eyebrow. He knew the name. I turned to him. He served with me in Kandahar. He saw firsthand what happened when you put flash over foundation. The man nodded once, slow and deliberate. That was the shift. Questions followed. Some about jurisdiction, some about timing, but no one questioned the outcome. I told them I hadn't violated any protocol. I acted under a directive, still valid, still buried in the system, ignored only by those too confident to read the fine print. A second file revealed communication logs, most of which showed Harper's son removing experienced operators from planning roles in favor of younger tech consultants with 0 combat time. A pause swept through the room. Then came the motion, a delay of transfer authority, until a full review was completed. I was asked to serve as interim advisor, with operational insight into field strategy for the next quarter. Andrew's shoulders slumped, but he didn't speak. His father looked at me, older than I'd ever seen him, not angry, just tired, like he realized what he'd risked to protect a name. When the meeting ended, I stepped outside and let the sunlight hit my face. For the first time in weeks, I felt clean. They had tried to box me out, write me off, replace 30 years of service with polished boots and a surname. But I wasn't just a soldier. I was the insurance policy no one read until it mattered. And today, it mattered more than ever. A week after the decision, I turned down the advisory promotion. The offer was generous, the title impressive, but none of it mattered to me. I'd done what I needed to do, not to climb higher, but to keep something sacred from falling apart. Harper resigned quietly. No press, no speeches, just a final salute to a legacy he no longer wanted to tarnish. His son didn't protest. He accepted his reassignment orders and left base under a cloud of quiet stares. No handshakes, no farewell. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt still, like a tide had finally gone out and I could see the shore for what it really was. There was no need for revenge, no hunger for humiliation. I wanted respect, and I had it, not in applause or medals, but in the way younger officers stood a little straighter when I passed, in how the mission briefs now opened with values before numbers. The culture was shifting back, slow but steady. I submitted my request for retirement with a single-page memo. No ceremony, no shadow command, just time. Time to rest. Time to remember who I was before I had to fight for every inch of relevance. Bravo Red was decommissioned the same week, locked under a new protocol. My name was on the closure file. That was enough. I left base the next morning before sunrise, threw my bag in the truck, looked once at the barracks, and drove. The road ahead wasn't long or short, it just was. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was chasing a ghost. I wasn't just retiring, I was returning. To myself, to quiet, to peace. The classroom was quiet as I stepped to the front. A dozen cadets sat straight-backed, eyes forward, notebooks open. They were sharp, eager, still untouched by the weight of command. I paused, let the silence settle, then spoke the words I wished someone had told me when I first put on a uniform. Legacy isn't in the ribbons you pin to your chest. It's in the hands you steady when they shake. It's in the hard decisions you make when no one's watching. It's in staying when it would be easier to walk away. You lead not to be remembered, but to make others stronger. That's what matters. That's what endures. One cadet in the back raised his chin, just a little. I saw it. That flicker of understanding. The kind that doesn't come from books. I didn't need applause. I didn't need thanks. Just that look. The one that said someone heard me, really heard me. I picked up a piece of chalk, wrote 3 words on the board, then turned and walked out. Integrity, duty, people. The sun was just starting to set over the academy lawn. Warm light spilled through the windows as I stepped outside. I stood there for a moment, watching the flag flutter in the wind. I wasn't chasing anything anymore. I'd already found it.